Hey guys, tonight we're heading into something cold, something ancient, something that should have been forgotten but wasn't. We're stepping into the world of Westeros, but not the one you know from the Game of Thrones. No, we're going back 8,000 years, to the time before history, before the Wall, before the Seven Kingdoms, to the Long Night. So, before you get comfortable, take a quick moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's understand why. 8,000 years later, the people of Westeros still whisper, "Winter is coming. Congratulations." You've just woken up in Westeros. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? You've just opened your eyes to a world where the sun disappeared a generation ago. The dead walk with glowing blue eyes, and surviving even a single day would be nearly impossible. The first thing you feel is the cold, not the kind that makes you shiver, the kind that burns, the kind that seeps into your bones and stays there, coiling around your ribs like frozen wire. The air smells wrong, copper and ash, old blood and older snow. You open your eyes, and there's no sun. There hasn't been a sun in months, maybe years. You've lost count. The sky is a smear of gray and black, hanging low like a funeral shroud. The wind doesn't howl, it whispers. And in that whisper, you hear something worse than screaming. Silence. The kind of silence that comes when nothing living is left to make sound. You stand. Your breath clouds in front of you, and for a moment, you mistake it for something else, something watching, because you're not alone out here. The dead don't rest during the long night. They rise, and they're hunting for warmth, for life. For you wake to darkness, not the comfortable darkness of night. When you know dawn is just a few hours away, not even the deep darkness of a windowless room, where you can still sense the world continuing outside. This is the darkness of absence, the absence of sun, of warmth, of hope. Your eyes open, and for a heartbeat, you think you've gone blind. The panic rises fast, a cold knot in your chest, until you remember. This is just the world now. This is what every morning looks like. Gray, black, endless shadow pressing down like a weight on your chest, like the sky itself has collapsed and is slowly suffocating everything beneath it. You lie still for a moment, wrapped in layers of fur that have gone stiff with frost during the night. The furs are heavy, pressing down on you like stones, and you wonder sometimes if you'll simply be buried under their weight one morning and never get up. You can't remember whose furs these were. Maybe they belonged to your father, the big bearskin he was so proud of. The one he hunted himself in the Wolfswood when he was barely 16. Maybe you took them from a corpse 3 winters ago, peeling them off frozen fingers that wouldn't let go, having to break the dead man's grip to claim what you needed to survive. The distinction doesn't matter anymore. Ownership is a concept from the old world, from the time when people had more than they needed and could afford to care about whose was whose. All that matters now is that these furs keep some small measure of warmth trapped against your skin, though even that is failing. The cold has been seeping through for weeks, finding every gap, every weak point in your defenses, every place where the hide has worn thin or torn or simply rotted from the inside despite the freezing temperatures. Your breath clouds in front of your face. You can't see it in the dark, but you can hear it, the soft whisper of moisture freezing in the air, turning to ice crystals that fall back onto your face like tiny, sharp kisses. Sometimes you wonder if your breath is slowly building a mask of ice over your nose and mouth. If one morning you'll wake to find yourself suffocating under a layer of frozen moisture from your own lungs. The cold is already inside you. It's settled into your bones weeks ago, maybe months. Time has stopped meaning anything, and it hasn't left since. It's like carrying a stone in your chest, heavy, constant, impossible to ignore. You've heard stories of people who froze from the inside out, their core temperature dropping so low that their hearts simply stopped, and they died without any external sign of injury. Just stopped being warm, and then stopped being alive. Some days you wonder if that's happening to you now, slowly, degree by degree, and you just haven't noticed because the change is so gradual, so inevitable, so utterly beyond your control. You flex your fingers slowly, carefully, testing each one. It's a ritual now. This morning inventory of what still works and what has been claimed by the cold. Most of them still respond, though the movement is stiff, painful, like bending frozen leather. The middle and ring finger on your left hand don't respond anymore. They're black now, the color of charred wood, dead from frostbite, hanging from your hand like charred sticks attached to living flesh. You don't even remember when it happened. Was it last week when you were out searching for wood and stayed out too long? Last month when you had to dig through snow with bare hands because your gloves had finally disintegrated? Time doesn't work properly anymore when there's no sun to mark the days, no seasons to mark the months, just an endless gray smear of cold and survival. Around you in the darkness, you hear breathing. Slow, shallow, careful breaths. Like everyone's afraid to use too much air. Afraid that drawing too deeply might somehow alert the things outside to your presence. Or maybe everyone's just trying to conserve energy. Because breathing hard means your body has to work harder to warm the air. Means you burn through precious calories faster. Means you die sooner. Your family. What's left of them. Your brother, Torn. He's 17, or he was, the last time anyone celebrated a name day. That was before the sun disappeared, back when people still marked time and years and thought about futures and planned for tomorrows that actually came. You remember his name day. Your mother made a cake from the last of the flour, sweetened with honey that cost more than you could afford. Torrin blew out 17 candles and made a wish. You wonder what he wished for. Probably something ordinary, something from the old world. A horse of his own, a pretty girl to notice him, a good harvest, normal things. Things that seemed important then and laughable now. Now his wishes would be different. Warmth, food, for the dead to stay dead, for the sun to come back, for any of this to make sense. Now he might be 18, 19, 20. Who knows? Who cares? Name days are for a world that still has time, that still believes in futures, that still thinks people live long enough for age to matter. In the long night, you don't count years, you count days, hours, heartbeats. Every moment you're still breathing is a victory, a tiny rebellion against the cold and the darkness and the certainty that you're all going to die here. Your sister Mara, she's younger. 14 when this started, you think, though you're not entirely sure anymore. Memory is unreliable, especially memories from before, from the world that had sunlight and warmth and a future. She was always small for her age, thin and quick like a bird, with their mother's dark hair and their father's gray eyes. She used to talk constantly, filling every silence with words and songs and observations about everything she saw. She had opinions about everything, strong opinions delivered with absolute confidence, the way only teenagers can manage. She doesn't talk much anymore, doesn't smile, doesn't sing the songs she used to sing when she was small. Those old northern ballads your grandmother taught her about, winter roses and brave nights and true love conquering all. The long night took that from her, took the music right out of her throat and replaced it with silence and fear. Sometimes you catch her staring at her hands, turning them over and over like she's surprised they still work, like she's forgotten what hands are supposed to do when they're not clenched into fists against the cold, or scrabbling through snow looking for anything edible. She's lost weight. They all have. But it's most visible on Mara because she started out so thin. Now she's skeletal, her face all angles and shadows. Her eyes too large for her face. Her wrists like sticks that might snap if you held them too tightly. Her breathing at night is shallow and raspy, like there's something broken inside her chest. You've heard that sound before, in people who were dying, and you try not to think about what it means. And your mother, she's still alive, still breathing. You can hear her shallow, ragged breaths. From the corner where she lies, a sound like wind through broken shutters, irregular and painful. But she hasn't spoken in 6 days, maybe 7. You've lost count, and it doesn't really matter except as a marker of how far gone she is, how little of her remains. She just lies there, staring at the wall of the shelter, her eyes reflecting the faint gray light that filters through the cracks in the stones. Her eyes are open but empty, like windows into an abandoned house. All the furniture is gone, all the people left, all the life that once filled those rooms has fled, and now there's just empty space and dust and the echo of what used to be. Sometimes she whispers names, your father, your younger brother Cale, who died when the whites came, your grandmother. She talks to ghosts, sets out food for the dead. The cold took her mind before it could take her body. You sit up slowly, carefully. Your muscles protest, sending sharp spikes of pain through your back and legs. Everything hurts in the cold. Pain has become so constant, so ordinary that you barely notice it anymore, except in those first moments of movement when your body reminds you that it's breaking down, falling apart, dying by inches. Your back is stiff from sleeping on frozen ground, the cold seeping up from below despite the furs, despite everything. Your chest aches with every breath because the air is so cold it feels like inhaling knives. Each breath is an act of will, a conscious choice to keep oxygenating your body, even though the process is painful, even though it hurts, even though sometimes you think it would be easier to just stop breathing and let the cold take you. Every movement requires thought, requires will, requires convincing your body that moving is better than simply lying still and letting the cold finish what it started weeks ago. You reach for your boots. They're frozen solid, standing upright where you left them like loyal sentries keeping watch through the night. The leather rigid as iron, the laces frozen into knots that will take 10 minutes to work loose. You have to work them back and forth, bending and flexing the stiff material, warming it with your hands, which makes your hands colder, but makes the boots pliable enough to slide onto your feet eventually. The leather cracks as it bends, small fractures appearing along the seams, spreading like veins through the material. You can see more cracks today than there were yesterday. They won't last much longer. Another week, maybe 2 if you're careful, if you don't do too much walking, if you can avoid getting them wet. And then what? Wrap your feet in rags and hope? Hope stopped working a long time ago, but you still do it anyway because what else is there? Nothing lasts in the long night. Leather cracks and splits and turns to powder. Metal becomes brittle, prone to shattering at the slightest impact. Wood rots from the inside out despite the freezing temperatures. Some kind of slow decay that happens even in the cold, like the long night, has introduced new rules to nature, new ways for things to fall apart. Even stone crumbles eventually, worn down by ice and wind and time. The very bones of buildings turning to dust. Everything decays. Everything falls apart, including people, especially people. You pull on another layer of fur, something that might have been a wolf once, or maybe a bear. The hide so old and worn you can't tell anymore. You found it in an abandoned shelter 3 miles south, draped over a skeleton that had frozen in place, sitting against a wall, like it had simply decided to rest for a moment and never got back up. The person had been dead for months, maybe longer, preserved by the cold, still sitting there with their hands folded in their lap like they were waiting patiently for something that never came. You took their furs and left them there, exposed to the cold, and you didn't feel guilty because guilt is a luxury from the old world, from the time when people could afford morality. The fur smells like rot and smoke and old blood, a combination so thick and pervasive that you've stopped noticing it most of the time. It's just the smell of survival now, the smell that clings to everyone who's still alive, the smell of unwashed bodies and fear and slow decay. But it's warm, or warm enough. In the long night, warm enough is the best you can hope for, and you've learned to recalibrate your expectations, to redefine what words like warm and safe and enough actually mean. Torrin stirs in the darkness. You hear him shift, hear the creak of frozen furs, hear his breath catch as he wakes and remembers where he is. There's always that moment, that split second when you first wake, when you've forgotten, when you think maybe you're back in the old house, in your old bed, and mother's downstairs cooking breakfast, and father's outside tending the animals, and everything is normal and warm and right. And then you remember. And the remembering hurts worse than the cold ever could, because it means facing another day of this, another day of survival without purpose, another day of slowly dying in the gray. You're going out again? His voice is hoarse, roughened by cold and lack of water, and weeks of breathing frozen air that scrapes your throat raw. He hasn't had water in hours. None of you have. The last of the snow you melted yesterday is gone, drunk down by 4 desperately thirsty people who knew they were drinking their future, but couldn't stop themselves because thirst is immediate and tomorrow is theoretical. Have to, you whisper back. Your voice sounds strange in the darkness, flat and dead, like all the emotion has been leached out of it. Maybe it has. Maybe you're becoming as cold inside as the world is outside. We're out of food. It's not safe. It's never safe. You've had this conversation before. Many times. It's becoming a ritual, a A script you both follow, because the familiar words are comforting, even when they don't change anything. He doesn't argue. He knows, you're right. There's nothing to argue about, no point in stating the obvious, no benefit to pretending there are other options when there aren't. Someone has to go. Someone always has to go. The food doesn't appear by magic. The water doesn't fall from the sky anymore. There's only snow. Endless snow, and snow has to be melted, and melted snow has to be rationed, and rationed water never seems like enough. And right now, that someone is you because you're the eldest, because you're the one who made the promise, because you're the one who can't quite give up, even when giving up would be easier, because you made a promise to yourself 3 winters ago, or however long it's been. Time is meaningless now. You promised you'd keep them alive, your brother, your sister, your mother, even if it kills you, especially if it kills you. Because what else is there? What else is your life worth, if not this? You have no future to save yourself for, no dreams to pursue, no aspirations beyond seeing another sunrise that will never come. All you have is this, the promise to keep them breathing, to keep their hearts beating, to keep them human for as long as possible, to ensure that when the end comes, it comes to people, not animals, to humans, not monsters. You move to the entrance of the shelter, a crude stone structure half buried in a snowdrift that has probably grown another 3 feet since yesterday, because the snow never stops falling, never pauses, never gives you a moment to catch up. It used to be someone's home, a farmhouse maybe, or a storehouse, back when people had farms and grew food and traded goods, and did all the normal things that people do in a world that isn't ending. You can still see hints of what it once was, a door frame that no longer has a door, just an opening where a door used to hang, a window that's been packed with stones and frozen hides, blocking out what little light there is, but also blocking the wind, which is more important. A hearth in the corner that hasn't held fire in months, because fire's too dangerous, too visible, too likely to draw the things that hunt warmth in the darkness. The hearth still has ashes in it from the last fire, from before you learned that fires were death sentences, from when you still thought you could stay warm and stay hidden at the same time. You learned better. Everyone who survived learned better. Everyone who didn't learn is dead now, killed by the things their fires attracted. The roof collapsed during the first winter, brought down by the weight of snow and ice and time. Tons of white death piling up until the support beams cracked and gave way, and the whole thing came down in a rush of timber and stone and frozen thatch. Now it's just 4 walls, barely standing, leaning against each other for support, and a makeshift door made of scavenged wood and frozen hides stitched together with gut string that's gone brittle in the cold. The door doesn't really close properly anymore. There's a gap at the bottom where wind whistles through constantly, a high, thin sound like someone screaming far away. You've stuffed it with rags, but the wind finds its way through anyway because wind always does. You press your shoulder against the door and push. The wind fights you. It always does. The door is frozen to its frame, ice having sealed it shut during the night, creating a bond stronger than nails or hinges. You have to throw your full weight against it to break the seal, and even then it only gives grudgingly, with sounds like bones breaking, like the shelter itself is protesting your decision to leave its relative safety. It scrapes open 6 inches with a sound that makes your teeth ache, then a foot, then finally wide enough for you to slip through sideways, your body barely fitting through the gap, turning yourself into something thin and insubstantial, something that might slip through cracks in the world if you try hard enough. The cold hits you like a physical blow. It's not a gradual thing, not a gentle transition from cold to colder. It's instant, absolute, overwhelming. The kind of cold that makes you gasp involuntarily, and then you regret gasping because the air feels like broken glass going down your throat, shredding your lungs, freezing them from the inside out. It's the kind of cold that people from the old world, from the world of summer and warmth, couldn't comprehend. They thought they knew cold, they didn't. This is cold that has weight and presence and intent. This is cold that wants you dead. You step outside, and the wind slams into you from the north like a fist made of ice and rage and ancient malice. It's not howling, it's screaming. A high, thin sound that cuts through your skull and settles behind your eyes like a migraine made of winter. The wind in the long night isn't just air moving, isn't just weather doing what weather does. It's alive. It has intent. It wants to strip the warmth from your body, wants to freeze your blood, wants to kill you and add you to the endless parade of corpses that litter the landscape like strange snow sculptures. The snow is waist deep here, chest deep in other places where the drifts have piled higher. In some areas, you've seen drifts tall enough to bury a house, tall enough to swallow entire villages whole, leaving no trace that people ever lived there, except maybe the very top of a chimney poking through like a finger pointing at the gray sky, accusing it of murder. The snow falls constantly, endlessly, adding layer upon layer upon layer until the whole world is just white and gray and the shapes underneath become abstract suggestions beneath the weight. Buildings, trees, bodies, they all look the same under enough snow, just mounds and lumps and irregular shapes that could be anything or nothing. You've learned to navigate by memory and dead reckoning, by remembering what used to be where, by counting steps and watching for landmarks that might still be visible. A wall that sticks, up higher than the snow. A tree that hasn't been completely buried yet. A cartwheel frozen into a drift at a weird angle. You navigate by corpses, sometimes, by bodies you've passed enough times to recognize them, to know that the one with the arm reaching up marks the corner where you need to turn east. The one face down in the drift means you're close to the old mill. The landscape is unrecognizable. Once, this was a village. You remember it vaguely from before. Not clearly, not in detail, because you were young when the long night began, and the memories are slipping away like water through frozen fingers. But you remember the feeling of it, the sense of community, the sound of people. There were houses here, stone and wood structures with thatched roofs, and smoke rising from chimneys, and the warm yellow glow of firelight in windows at night. There were fields where wheat and barley grew in the summer, golden and beautiful and proof that life could thrive even in the north, even in a place where winter was always just a season away. There was a small sept with 7 walls and 7 faces carved into the stone, representing the 7 who are one, and people would gather there on holy days to pray and sing, and feel like they were part of something larger than themselves, part of a cosmic order that had meaning and purpose. You remember the sound of the bells, 7 bells that rang out on holy days, each one a different note, and together they made a chord that could be heard for miles. The bells are silent now, probably buried under snow, probably will never ring again. There was a market square where merchants came through twice a month with carts full of grain and cloth and salt and spices and tools, and all the small luxuries that made life bearable and sometimes even good. Iron nails and copper pots and glass bottles and fine thread and 100 other things that seemed ordinary then and precious beyond measure now. There was haggling and laughter and gossip and the exchange of news from other places, from the world beyond the village, from the kingdom that stretched from the wall to the southern deserts. There was a blacksmith whose hammer rang out every morning like a bell calling the village to work, a rhythmic clanging that said the world was still normal, still functioning, still following the old patterns where men worked and women cooked and children played and everything made sense. The smith's name was Micken, and he was huge, with arms like tree trunks, and a laugh that could shake walls. He made everything the village needed, nails and hinges and horseshoes and blades. He's dead now. You saw him turn, saw the blue glow appear in his eyes, saw him rise and shamble off to join the army of the dead. There was an inn where men drank ale and told stories and laughed, where travelers could find a warm meal and a bed and a friendly face. The inn was called the Smoking Log, and it had a carved wooden sign out front that showed a log with smoke rising from it, and inside there was always a fire burning and meat roasting and ale flowing. The innkeeper was a fat man named Mott who told jokes that weren't funny, but everyone laughed anyway because laughing felt good, because laughter was a kind of warmth. The inn is gone now, burned down in the first winter when someone's fire got out of control, when people still thought they could fight the cold with flames, before they learned that fires just drew the whites like moths to a candle. There was life here. People laughed here. Children played games in the street, chasing each other and shrieking with joy. Lovers met in secret, stealing kisses in the shadow of the sept, making promises they meant to keep. Old men argued about nothing, about whose grandfather was tougher, about whether the winters were harder in the old days. Comfortable arguments that passed the time and hurt no one. Women gathered by the well to gossip and wash clothes and complain about their husbands in that way that meant they actually loved them. Life happened here in all its messy, beautiful, ordinary glory. Now it's just white and gray and black. The houses are gone, collapsed under snow, or torn apart for firewood in those desperate early days, when people still thought they could outlast the cold if they just stayed warm enough, when they didn't yet understand that the cold wasn't something you could fight with fires and furs, that it was absolute and patient and would win eventually no matter what you did. The Sept is a ruin, its 7 walls cracked and broken, its 7 faces worn smooth by wind and ice until they're just blank stones staring at nothing. Gods who either abandoned their worshippers or never existed in the first place. The fields are frozen wastelands, buried under so much snow that you'd never know there was soil underneath, never know that anything ever grew here, never know that this was once productive land that fed families and created surplus and connected to a larger economy. The market square is an empty expanse of white, indistinguishable from everything around it, except that you know it's there. You remember where it was, and that memory is all that gives it any meaning. The blacksmith's forge is cold and dead, the anvil buried, the hammer rusted and forgotten, the fire that never went out for 30 years, finally extinguished by cold that couldn't be fought. The inn is a skeleton of charred beams, black bones poking through white snow, a monument to desperation and failure. Someone tried to burn it down for warmth and lost control of the flames, and now it stands as a reminder that fire, which once seemed like the answer to everything, can destroy as easily as it saves. And the people, most of them are dead. You've seen the corpses, frozen and preserved, scattered across the village in various states of decay and dismemberment. Some died from the cold, some from hunger, some from despair so deep they simply stopped fighting and let the end come. Some died from the whites, torn apart by things that used to be their neighbors and friends and family. You can tell which ones died which way. The ones who froze just looked peaceful, like they fell asleep and didn't wake up. The ones who starved are skeletal, their skin stretched tight over bones, their faces twisted in agony because starvation is a slow, painful death. The ones who gave up, who walked out into the snow and let go, they look almost serene, like they found something in the cold that the living can't understand. And the ones the whites killed, they're in pieces, scattered, torn apart with savage efficiency, reduced to meat and bone and testimony to what waits in the darkness. The rest are hiding, just like you, scattered across the ruins in makeshift shelters, living day to day, hour to hour, trying not to think about the fact that this is all there is now. This is what life has become, and it's never going to get better. You know there are others out there because sometimes you see smoke, thin trails of gray against gray sky that means someone else is desperate enough to risk a fire. Sometimes you hear sounds in the distance, screams or shouts, or the clang of metal on metal, that might be someone fighting whites, or might be someone going mad, or might be nothing, just the wind playing tricks. You've thought about trying to find the other survivors, about banding together, about pooling resources and creating some kind of community. But every time you think about it, you remember what happens when people gather. They draw attention, the whites come, and then everyone dies at once instead of dying slowly and separately. At least scattered and hidden, some people survive. Together you'd all die together, and that would be it. The last humans in the region gone in one terrible night. You start walking, east, toward where the village square used to be, toward the place where the market once stood, where people once bought and sold and traded and lived. There's a storehouse there, or there was, a squat stone building with a heavy door and small windows, built to keep grain dry and safe from rats. You checked it 2 weeks ago and found nothing but empty barrels and rat bones. The rats themselves long dead, unable to survive what humans can barely survive. But maybe you missed something. Maybe there's a cellar you didn't see, hidden under snow or behind a collapsed wall. Maybe someone stashed supplies in a corner you didn't search thoroughly enough. Maybe there are bags of grain that fell behind something and were forgotten. Maybe. You live on maybes now. Maybes are all you have, the only thing that keeps you going. The tiny possibility that this time will be different. This time you'll find something. This time luck will favor you. It never does, but you keep hoping anyway because hope is the last thing to die. Even after everything else is gone. Each step is a battle. The snow grabs at your legs like hands, reaching up from the ground, trying to pull you down, trying to make you join all the other bodies buried beneath the white. The wind pushes you sideways, then reverses direction and pushes you the other way, like it's playing with you, like it's testing to see how much you can take before you break, before you fall down and don't get up. Your breath comes in short, painful gasps, and each one burns because the air is so cold it feels like swallowing shards of ice. You can feel them scraping down your throat, settling in your lungs, freezing you from the inside. Your eyes water from the wind, tears streaming down your face involuntarily, and the tears freeze on your cheeks instantly, leaving trails of ice like someone carved lines into your face, like the cold is marking you, claiming you, saying you belong to winter now. Your nose is running, and the mucus freezes too, creating ice crystals around your nostrils that crack when you breathe, that break and reform and break again, in a cycle that would be fascinating if it wasn't happening to your own body. You pass a frozen corpse half buried in a drift, just an arm and part of a shoulder visible above the snow, the hand reaching toward the sky like it died trying to grasp something, warmth or hope or the sun that abandoned this world. The flesh is gray, preserved by the cold, frozen solid as stone. You don't stop to look. You've seen too many corpses. In the first few weeks you used to stop, used to check if they were someone you knew, used to say a prayer to the old gods or the new, whatever gods might be listening, asking them to take care of the dead person's soul, to give them rest, to give them whatever comfort the dead could find. Now you just walk past. The dead are everywhere. They outnumber the living now, probably by hundreds to one, maybe thousands to one. Stopping to acknowledge each one would take forever, would require energy you don't have, would force you to feel things you can't afford to feel. So you've learned to look past them, to see them as features of the landscape like rocks or trees, obstacles to avoid but not things to grieve. Grief is exhausting. Grief uses resources. Grief is a luxury you can't afford. You pass the blackened remains of a fire, just ash and charred stones arranged in a circle, half buried in the snow. The ash scattered by wind but still visible as dark smudges against the white. Someone tried to stay warm here, built a fire, gathered wood, sat around the flames and tried to pretend they weren't dying. It didn't work. Either the whites found them, drawn to the heat and the light like moths to a flame, and killed them and raised them to join the army of the dead, or they simply froze despite the flames because fire can only do so much against the absolute cold of the long night, because eventually the wood runs out or the cold becomes too much, or you fall asleep and the fire dies and you don't wake up. You pass a cart overturned in the snow, its wheels shattered, the wood splintered and broken, whatever cargo it once carried long gone, scavenged by survivors or stolen by the desperate, or simply lost to the endless white, buried under drifts and forgotten. The cart is at an angle, one side higher than the other, creating a small wind shelter on the leeward side. You've thought about using it for cover, about stopping here to rest, about getting out of the wind for just a moment. But stopping means dying. You've learned that. Once you stop moving, the cold settles into your bones faster, your body temperature drops, and getting moving again becomes harder, and soon you can't get moving at all, and that's it. So you keep walking, keep moving, keep putting one foot in front of the other even though it hurts, even though you're tired, even though you want to stop and rest and close your eyes just for a moment. You've seen the bodies of people who stop to rest. They look peaceful. That's what scares you most. That stopping looks attractive. That death, when it comes from the cold, doesn't look like an ending but like relief, like the first good sleep you've had in months, like finally being warm. And then you see it, a figure, standing in the distance, perfectly still. Your heart stops for a beat, that terrible moment of recognition before your brain catches up to what your eyes are seeing. Then it starts again, hammering against your ribs so hard you can feel it in your throat, in your temples, everywhere. Your pulse suddenly loud enough to drown out the wind. You freeze in place, one foot still raised mid-step, balanced precariously, snow clinging to your boot. The figure doesn't move, doesn't respond to your presence, just stands there, perfectly motionless in a way that no living thing stands. Because living things are never perfectly still. Living things sway slightly, shift weight, breathe. The figure does none of these things. At first you think, you hope, you desperately want to believe it's another survivor. Someone else scavenging, someone you can maybe trade with, share information with, share supplies if both of you have anything to share. Someone you can talk to, exchange news, confirm that you're not the only person left alive in the world. Someone to share the burden of survival with, even if only for a few minutes. Someone to remind you that you're human, that human connection is still possible, that you're not completely alone. Hello? You call out. Your voice comes out scratchy, weak, barely audible over the wind. You haven't spoken loudly in days, haven't needed to, and your vocal cords have gone rough with disuse and cold. You clear your throat, pain shooting through your chest, and try again, louder. Hello? Is someone there? The figure doesn't respond, doesn't turn, doesn't acknowledge your existence in any way, just stands there. And that's when the first prickle of fear runs down your spine. When your instincts start screaming at you that something is wrong, that living people don't stand like that you need to run right now. You take a step closer, then another. Your hand moves unconsciously to the knife at your belt, a small blade, barely more than a letter opener, its edge dulled from use and abuse and being sharpened too many times on rough stones. It's all you have. It's not much. You know from experience that it won't do much against a white, that cutting them doesn't stop them unless you remove the head or destroy them completely. But having a weapon in your hand makes you feel slightly less helpless. The wind shifts, and for just a moment, the blowing snow clears, the curtain of white parts, and you see clearly. And you see the eyes, blue, glowing, empty. That terrible frozen star glow that means death. That means the person you're looking at isn't a person anymore, is just meat animated by winter magic, is just a corpse that forgot to lie down. Oh gods, no. The words come out as a whisper, stolen by the wind, unheard by anyone but you. You recognize the face. It's Jorn, old Jorn the tanner, who used to work leather in his shop near the market square, whose hands were permanently stained brown from the tanning solutions, who smelled like cured hides and wood smoke and sweat. He would trade hides for bread or salt or whatever he needed, always driving a hard bargain but fair, never cheating anyone, respected in the community as an honest tradesman. He told stories while he worked, long rambling tales about his youth, about hunting in the Wolfswood with his father and brothers, about a girl he loved before he met his wife, about the time he killed a shadow cat that was terrorizing the local farms. He was kind to you when you were young. He showed you how to cure a hide when you were 8 years old, his gnarled hands guiding yours through the process, teaching you to scrape the flesh from the skin without tearing it, to work the tanning solution in properly, to stretch and dry the hide so it would be supple and strong. He had infinite patience, never getting frustrated when you made mistakes, always encouraging, always willing to teach. He told you that knowing how to work leather would serve you well, that it was a skill worth having. He was right. The furs that keep you alive now, you prepared them yourself using the skills he taught you. And sometimes when you're working a hide, you can hear his voice in your head, giving instructions, offering advice, praising good work. You helped bury him 4 days ago. 5. Time is slippery. He died from the cold, just went to sleep one night and didn't wake up, his body giving out after months of inadequate food and brutal conditions. You and Torin helped pile stones over his body because the ground was too frozen to dig, because burial meant something even in the long night, even when ceremonies seemed pointless, because treating the dead with respect was one of the few things that separated you from animals. You piled the stones carefully, creating a cairn that would hopefully keep scavengers away. That would mark the spot so people would know someone was buried there. Someone who mattered, someone who had a name. You didn't say much, didn't have the energy for long speeches or flowery eulogies. Just, here lies Jorn. He was a good man. May his rest be warmer than his life. Simple words, but meant. And then you left him there and went back to the work of surviving. He shouldn't be standing. The stones should still be piled over him, keeping him in place, keeping him dead. But he is standing. The stones are scattered, pushed aside from the inside, meaning he woke up under there in the dark, meaning he had to claw his way out, meaning the whites came for him even in his cairn, touched him and raised him and made him one of them. His face is gray, frost-covered, lips pulled back in a rictus that might be a smile, or might just be the way his face froze when he died and was raised. His clothes are torn, stained with old blood that's gone black, frozen solid in some places. And those eyes, those terrible burning blue eyes, are fixed on you. There's nothing in them, no recognition, no humanity, no memory of the man who used to inhabit that body. Jorn is gone. Whatever that is, it's not Jorn anymore. It's just a thing wearing Jorn's face, using Jorn's body, a puppet made of dead flesh and winter magic. Just hunger, just cold, just an endless, terrible emptiness that wants to fill itself with warmth, with life, with you. And then he runs, not walks, not shambles, runs, fast. Faster than any living person should be able to move in waist-deep snow. Faster than should be possible. Because whites don't get tired, don't feel the burn in their muscles, don't need to breathe, don't have any of the limitations that hold back the living. They're stronger than they were in life, faster, more relentless, because death has stripped away all the body's safety mechanisms, all the governors that keep living people from tearing themselves apart with their own strength. You don't think. Thinking gets you killed. You just move. Your body acts before your mind catches up, pure survival instinct taking over. Millions of years of evolution screaming at you to run from the predator, to flee from the danger, to move now and think later if there is a later. You spin on your heel and sprint back toward the shelter. Your legs scream in protest, muscles burning, cramping, pushed beyond what they can safely do. Your lungs burn for air, each breath a knife of cold pain stabbing into your chest. The snow drags at you like hands clawing from below, like the buried dead are reaching up to pull you down to join them. Behind you there's no sound, no footsteps crunching in snow, no breathing, no grunting or panting or any of the sounds a living person makes when running. Just the wind, and the terrible knowledge that something dead is chasing you. Something that doesn't need to breathe, doesn't need to rest, doesn't feel pain or exhaustion or doubt. The whites don't tire. They don't feel the cold because they are the cold. They don't stop for anything. They just come, relentless, inevitable, patient. They can chase you for miles if necessary, for days, forever, because they have all the time in the world and you don't. You see the shelter ahead, 50 feet, 40, 30, and you're gasping now. Vision blurring at the edges from exertion and lack of oxygen, black spots dancing in front of your eyes, your body pushed to its absolute limit and beyond. Your legs are burning, each step sending jolts of pain through your knees and hips. Your chest is tight with pain, your heart hammering so fast it feels like it might explode. 20 feet. The door is still open, a dark rectangle in the white. Salvation if you can just reach it. Torin is there, spear in hand, eyes wide with terror because he can see what's chasing you, even though you can't hear it, can see death approaching with glowing blue eyes. 10 feet. You hear something behind you now. Not footsteps, just displacement. The sound of something moving fast through snow, cutting through the drifts like they're nothing, like the snow that slows you down doesn't even exist for them. The sound is close, too close. A few feet maybe, close enough that if you stumble, if you fall, it will be on you before you can get up. Close it, you scream. The words tear out of your throat, raw and desperate. Close it now. You hit the entrance at full speed. No time to slow down, no time to be careful. Half diving, half falling through the gap. Your shoulder slams into the stone frame, and pain explodes through your arm, bright and sharp and immediate. But you don't care because you're inside, you're through, you made it. Torin slams the door shut behind you with all his strength, throwing his weight against it. There's a thud, heavy, immediate. The whole door shudders in its frame. Something hit the door from outside, hard enough to crack the wood, hard enough that you can hear it splinter. You lie on the frozen ground, gasping, shaking, heart hammering so hard you think it might crack your ribs, might break something inside your chest. Your whole body is trembling, adrenaline and terror flooding your system, making your hands shake uncontrollably, making your teeth chatter. Your shoulder is throbbing where you hit the frame, and you're pretty sure you've done real damage, torn something or broken something. But it doesn't matter because you're alive. Your lungs are burning, each breath painful, and you can taste blood in your mouth. Probably bit your tongue, or your lip during the run. Probably did a dozen small injuries that you'll discover later when the adrenaline wears off. And outside, you hear it. Scratch, 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 slow, methodical, patient. Like someone dragging frozen fingernails across stone, testing for weakness, looking for a way in. Trying to find the gap that will let them inside to kill you. The white is still there. It knows you're inside. It can probably smell you. Smell the warmth of your body, the life in your blood, and it's willing to wait. They're always willing to wait. Time means nothing to the dead. They can stand outside your door for days, for weeks, for months if necessary, scratching and waiting, patient as winter itself. because they know eventually you'll have to come out. Eventually you'll run out of food, or water, or warmth, or hope. Eventually the door will open, and they'll be there. You sit with your back against the door, chest heaving, legs trembling uncontrollably. You can feel the vibrations through the wood every time the white scratches, every impact sending a small shudder through your spine, through your whole body. A reminder that only a few inches of old wood and frozen hide stand between you and death. Torrance stands above you, spear pointed at the door, knuckles white around the shaft, his hands shaking. He's shaking all over, actually. Not from cold, from fear. Raw terror plain on his face. You can see it in his eyes, see the way his jaw is clenched so tight the muscles stand out. See the way he's breathing too fast and too shallow, hyperventilating, on the edge of panic. Was it... He starts. His voice breaks. He clears his throat, tries again. Was it... Jorn? You whisper. The name comes out flat, dead. It was Jorn. Mara makes a small sound from the corner. Not quite a sob, not quite a scream. Just a sound, wordless and broken, like something inside her cracked and fell away. Like one more piece of her humanity cracking and falling away. One more small death in a world of deaths. Your mother doesn't react at all. She just keeps staring at the wall, her eyes empty, her face slack. No response to the drama playing out around her. She's beyond fear now, beyond caring, beyond everything except the distant memories that play behind her eyes. The scratching continues, slow, steady, never stopping. A rhythm like a heartbeat, like the long night itself has a pulse, and this is it. This patient scratching of dead fingers on stone. How many of them are out there? Torrin asks quietly. His voice is thin, stretched, on the edge of breaking. I don't know, you say. I only saw one, but there are never just one. The whites travel in groups, packs, hordes, drawn together by whatever force animates them, whatever dark purpose drives them south. And if one found you, if one saw you running, others will follow the movement, the disturbance, the warmth. They communicate somehow, not with words or sounds, but with something deeper, some connection through the magic that raised them. When one finds prey, others come, always, because that's what they hunt. Not food, not blood. They don't eat, don't need sustenance, don't require anything that living things require. They hunt warmth, life, the spark of existence that sets living things apart from dead ones. That's what draws them, what they sense somehow, what they're compelled to extinguish. And once they find it, once they lock onto that warmth, they don't leave. They gather. They wait. They press in closer and closer, more of them arriving every hour, every day, until there's a crowd of blue-eyed corpses standing outside your shelter, patient and silent and utterly inevitable. You've heard stories about people who were trapped in shelters by whites, surrounded, unable to leave. Most of those stories end the same way. The people inside slowly starve or die of thirst or simply lose hope and walk out to end it quickly rather than die slowly. Sometimes the stories end with the people inside taking their own lives, killing themselves rather than becoming whites, choosing to die human rather than live dead. You've thought about it, in the darkest moments, in the times when the scratching goes on for days, and the food is gone, and the water is gone, and there's nothing left but waiting. You've thought about it, about whether it would be better to end it yourself, to choose your own death, to die with some tiny shred of dignity rather than slowly wasting away while the dead wait patiently outside. But you haven't done it. Some part of you, the stubborn part, the part that refuses to give up even when giving up would be merciful, keeps you going, keeps you breathing, keeps you fighting, because dying is easy. Living is hard. And maybe somewhere deep in your animal brain, you believe that hard is better, that struggle has meaning, that surviving one more day matters even if you don't know why. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time is meaningless in the darkness, in the endless gray that might be day or night or something in between. The scratching continues. Sometimes it stops for a while, and you hope desperately that maybe the white wandered off, got distracted by something else, followed some other warm thing into the distance. But then it starts again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Like it's trying to remind you, I'm still here. I'm not leaving. I'm never leaving. I can wait forever. Can you? Your legs stop shaking eventually, your breathing slows, your heart rate drops back to something approaching normal, though your chest still aches, and you're pretty sure you've done some damage, pulled something, or bruised your ribs or worse. But the fear doesn't leave, it just settles into your stomach like ice, heavy and cold and permanent, taking up residence in your gut like it plans to stay forever. This is your life now. This is every day. Go out and search for food, run from whites, hide in the shelter, listen to them scratch. Wonder if today is the day they get in. Wonder if today is the day you don't come back. Torin finally sits down, spear across his knees. He looks exhausted, hollow, like someone carved out everything inside him and left just the shell. We can't keep doing this, he says quietly. His voice is barely audible over the wind and the scratching. Living like this. What choice do we have? You try to keep your voice neutral, to not let the despair show, but it seeps through anyway. We could run, he says, head south, find somewhere warmer, somewhere the whites haven't reached yet. There is nowhere warmer, you say. You've had this conversation before, many times. But you go through it again because what else is there to do? The whole world is frozen, but maybe. Torin. You look at him, really look at him, and you see yourself reflected in his eyes. Thin, gaunt, desperate, dying slowly. We barely survived going 50 feet from this shelter. You think we could make it south, for miles, through snow and cold and whites and who knows what else? Through the deep drifts and the frozen rivers and the endless white expanse with no shelter, no food, no supplies? We'd die in hours, days at most. He doesn't answer. Because he knows you're right. Because he's not stupid, just desperate. And desperation makes people suggest impossible things. This shelter's a trap. It's 4 stone walls and a door that barely closes, and a floor of frozen dirt. It's not safety, it's not security. It's just a slightly slower way to die, but everywhere else is death. Immediate, violent, certain. At least here you have walls. At least here you can pretend you're protected, even though you know you're not, even though the scratching reminds you every moment that death is waiting just outside, patient and inevitable. Your stomach clenches, tight, painful, a cramping sensation that's become so familiar you barely notice it anymore until it gets bad, until it reminds you that your body is still trying to function despite everything you're putting it through, despite being slowly starved, despite the cold, despite the stress and fear and exhaustion that never ends. You haven't eaten in 2 days, 48 hours. You're sure of that because you remember the last time you had food. Remember chewing that strip of dried meat for what felt like hours, working it between your teeth until it finally broke down enough to swallow. The taste was somewhere between leather and rot, and it sat in your stomach like a stone, hard and uncomfortable. But it was food, and food is sacred now. Before that, 3 days. A handful of frozen berries that you found under a bush, scraping away snow to reveal them clinging to dead branches. They were probably rotten, probably poisonous, but you ate them anyway because what choice did you have? They gave you stomach cramps that lasted a day, made you dizzy and nauseous, but they didn't kill you, and that makes them a successful meal. Before that, you can't even remember. Time and hunger blur together. Days without food are normal now. Going a week between meals isn't unusual. Your body has learned to run on nothing, burning through its reserves, cannibalizing itself to keep vital functions going. You've lost weight you didn't have to lose, your clothes hanging loose, your ribs visible, your face all angles and shadows. Food is almost gone. You glance at the corner where you keep your supplies, where the leather sack sits, tied shut with a cord that's starting to fray, one strand away from breaking. You know what's inside without looking. You've counted it so many times you could draw a map of every item. 2 strips of dried meat, each one about the size of your palm but half as thick, so tough and desiccated that chewing them is like chewing wood. A handful of frozen berries that you found 2 weeks ago beneath a snow-covered bush, scraping with bare hands until your fingers bled from the ice. They're probably rotten under the frost, probably toxic by now. But you're keeping them anyway because they're food, and food is sacred, and maybe they'll keep you alive one more day. A chunk of stale bread hard enough to break teeth if you're not careful, hard as stone, gone gray with age and cold. You'd have to soak it in water to make it edible, let it soften for hours, and even then it would taste like wet cardboard. But it's calories. It's fuel. It's the difference between moving and not moving, between thinking clearly and thinking through a fog of starvation. That's it. That's all that stands between your family and starvation. 4 people. Maybe 2 days worth of food if you're extremely careful. If you divide it perfectly. If no one takes more than their share. If everyone is willing to stay hungry. To ignore the cramping pain in their gut. To pretend they're not slowly dying. And then what? Then you go out again. Search again. Hope again. Dig through snow looking for anything. Any scrap of food that might have been overlooked. Any place that hasn't been scavenged already. Maybe you'll find a forgotten cache, a cellar someone sealed and forgot about, a bag of grain hidden under floorboards. Maybe you'll get lucky, and if you don't find anything, then you die. Simple as that. No grand meaning. No dramatic final scene. Just slow fading, growing weaker and weaker, until you don't have the energy to go out anymore, until you're too weak to move, until your body finally gives up and stops. Starvation is a quiet death. Peaceful in its way. You just go to sleep and don't wake up. It's not the worst way to die in the long night. Torrin sees you looking at the sack. How much do we have left? He asks. He already knows, you think. He counts the supplies too, obsesses over them, does the same math you do. But asking makes it real, makes it a conversation instead of just fear bouncing around inside your own head. Enough for maybe 2 more days, you say, if we're careful. If we eat as little as possible, if we ignore the hunger as long as we can. And then we starve, you don't say. And then we die, you don't say. And then it's over, you don't say. You don't answer. Because the answer's obvious. The answer's written on every corpse outside, written in the hollow faces of everyone still alive, written in the slow decay of everything around you. Starvation, or worse. You've heard the stories. Whispers passed from shelter to shelter on those rare moments when survivors meet in the gray spaces between the ruins. When 2 desperate people cross paths and exchange information before hurrying away, before the whites notice the gathering. Stories about what happens when the food runs out completely, when desperation crushes morality, when survival becomes more important than humanity, when people stop being people and become animals fighting over scraps. When the last taboos fall away, when the final boundaries are crossed. Some villages turn to darker things. You've seen the bones. Outside certain shelters where the desperate made choices that no one should have to make. Piled in the snow like firewood, cracked open, the marrow scraped out, long bones split lengthwise to get at the soft tissue inside, skulls broken open to access what's inside, teeth marks on the ends. Human teeth marks, you're sure of that, because you've seen animal teeth marks, and these are different, smaller, more organized. No one talks about it. But everyone knows. Everyone has seen the bones, has noticed which shelters have piles outside, has made mental notes about which survivors to avoid, which people have crossed that line and can't be trusted anymore. The long night doesn't just kill your body, it kills your soul. It takes everything that makes you human, compassion, empathy, love, mercy, the ability to see other people as people instead of just resources or threats, and freezes it until it shatters. And what's left isn't a person anymore. It's just a thing that's still breathing, still moving, but dead inside in all the ways that matter. You've wondered if you'll cross that line eventually. If the hunger gets bad enough, if Torrin or Mara or your mother dies, if their body is just lying there, just meat, already dead. So what's the harm? You've wondered if you have that in you, if you could do it, if you could take that final step into complete abandon of civilization. You don't think you could, but you also didn't think a lot of things before the long night, and you've learned that extreme circumstances change people in ways they can't predict, that everyone has a breaking point, that survival instinct can override any moral principle if things get bad enough. You hope you never find out. You hope it doesn't come to that. You hope you die before you have to make that choice. But hope is a poor defense against hunger. Mara is crying softly in the corner, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet hitching breaths, like she's trying to cry without making sound, like even grief has to be rationed and hidden and controlled. You want to go to her, want to hold her like you did when she was small and woke from nightmares about monsters under the bed. Want to stroke her hair and tell her it's going to be okay, that the monsters aren't real, that morning will come and chase away the bad dreams, but you can't, because it's not going to be okay, because the monsters are real now, and they're not under the bed, they're outside the door, scratching patiently, waiting with blue eyes and frozen patience. And lying to her would be crueler than the truth, would be taking away the one thing she has left, which is a clear understanding of reality, however terrible that reality is. So you just sit there, back against the door, listening to the scratching outside and the crying inside, and you think about fire. You used to take fire for granted. It was just something that existed, something so common and ordinary that you never thought about it. You lit a candle when you needed light, as simple as breathing, built a fire in the hearth when you needed warmth, threw in another log when it started to die down, used it for cooking, for comfort, for keeping the darkness at bay both literally and figuratively. Fire was so common, so ordinary, so utterly mundane that you never appreciated it, never understood how precious it was, never realized you were living in a golden age of abundant warmth that would end suddenly and never return. Now fire is sacred, fire is life. Fire is the difference between surviving and dying, between hope and despair, between human and animal. You have one precious bundle of kindling left, just one. You prepared it carefully weeks ago, gathering the driest wood you could find, strips of bark and dead grass and small twigs, anything that would catch easily and burn hot. You wrapped it in a piece of leather to keep it dry, to protect it from moisture, to ensure it would light when you needed it. Enough for maybe one fire, you estimate. One small flame that will burn for an hour, maybe two if you're lucky and you feed it carefully, adding fuel bit by bit, nursing it along, making it last as long as possible. You're saving it. For what? You're not entirely sure. A special occasion? A moment of true desperation? But how much more desperate can you get than this? Trapped in a shelter with a white outside, slowly starving, slowly freezing, slowly losing hope? But you save it anyway because once it's gone forever. And there's no getting more, no finding replacement kindling in this frozen wasteland. Because without fire, without heat even for an hour or two, the cold will take you faster than the whites ever could, will settle into your bones and stop your heart, will freeze you from the inside until you simply stop. You close your eyes and try to remember what the sun looked like. It's getting harder every day, every week, every month. The details are fading, slipping away like water through frozen fingers, like sand through an hourglass, like smoke dispersing in wind. Memory is a strange thing. You think it's solid, permanent, something you can rely on, but it's not. It's fluid. It changes. It decays just like everything else in the long night, rotting from within, details dropping away, colors fading, until what you remember is more imagination than truth, more wish than reality. You remember the sun was bright, painfully so, bright enough that looking at it hurt your eyes, bright enough that you had to look away or be blinded. Warm. So warm. You remember that warmth on your face, remember the way it seeped into your skin, into your muscles, making you feel alive and real and connected to the world. The way it made shadows, crisp, clear shadows that moved across the ground as the day progressed. Shadows that told you what time it was, that gave the world depth and dimension and meaning. Yellow, you think it was yellow? Or was it gold? Orange at sunrise? White at midday when it was highest in the sky? The color is slipping away from you, becoming uncertain, becoming something you're less sure about with every passing day. You remember the way shadows worked, the way they stretched long in the morning and evening, short at midday, the way they gave the world texture and contrast, made flat things appear three-dimensional, made the landscape interesting and varied. You remember how the sun made colors vibrant, made red really red, and green really green, and blue really blue, brought out richness that you never appreciated until it was gone. Now everything is gray. Gray snow, gray sky, gray light that has no source, that comes from everywhere and nowhere, that illuminates nothing, that makes everything flat and dead and colorless. But the image of the sun itself is blurry now, like trying to remember a dream hours after waking, after you've been up and moving and thinking about other things, and the dream has faded to just fragments, just impressions, just a feeling without details. You grasp at the memory, try to hold it, try to see it clearly in your mind's eye, but it slips away. The harder you try to remember, the faster it fades, replaced by gray, by cold, by the endless now of the long night that has no past and no future, only this eternal frozen present. You were young when the long night began, 8 years old you think, or 9, old enough to remember the world before, to have clear memories of sunshine and summer and warmth, but young enough that those memories are slipping, being replaced by new memories of cold and darkness and fear. You spent more of your life now in the long night than you did in the world before. The long night is becoming your normal, becoming what you know, and the world before is becoming the dream, the fantasy, the thing that seems impossible. You remember your father, Rickard, tall, or he seemed tall to a child. Maybe he was actually average height, but to you he was a giant, strong, with arms like tree trunks and hands that could do anything, fix anything, build anything. Smiling, he was always smiling, at least in your memories, though that's probably not true. Probably you've edited out the frowns and the worried looks and the angry moments and kept only the good parts. Memory does that. Makes the past better than it was. Makes the dead into saints. He had a beard that tickled when he kissed your forehead, rough and scratchy, but somehow comforting. He had hands that were rough from work but gentle when they held yours. Calloused from handling tools and weapons and doing the 1,000 tasks that running a small farmstead required. He had a laugh that was loud and genuine and made everyone around him smile, a laugh that came from deep in his belly, a laugh that said the world was good and life was worth living. He made everything seem safe, made you believe that nothing bad could happen as long as he was there. He made everything the village needed, or he tried to. Nails and hinges when things needed fixing, horseshoes when the horses needed shoeing, blades when blades were needed. He wasn't a master smith, just a man who knew enough about metalwork to keep a small community functioning. He was proud of his work, took care with each piece, made sure everything was solid and functional and would last. He believed in doing things right, in taking the time to do quality work, in making things that would endure. He died in the first year of the long night, went out hunting for food and never came back, disappearing into the gray one morning and simply not returning. You waited, they all waited, for days, for a week, for 2 weeks, hoping he would appear, hoping he was just lost, hoping he had found shelter somewhere and was waiting for the weather to clear. But he didn't come back. You found his body 3 weeks later, frozen solid, half buried in snow about 2 miles from the village. He was sitting propped against a tree, his bow still in his hand, an arrow still nocked. His face was peaceful, like he'd just laid down to rest for a moment. His eyes were closed. There was no sign of violence, no wounds, no blood. He had simply sat down and frozen to death, probably knowing what was happening, probably accepting it, probably thinking about his family as the cold took him. You couldn't bring him back. His body was too heavy, frozen solid, impossible to move. So you left him there, said a prayer, promised to come back when you could. You never did. You don't even know if he's still there or if the whites found him and raised him, and now he's walking around somewhere with blue eyes and frozen purpose. The worst part? You were relieved. The thought came immediately, unbidden, unwanted, but undeniable. You were relieved that he was dead, because it meant more food for the rest of you, because 4 mouths are easier to feed than 5, because every death meant the survivors had a slightly better chance, slightly more resources, slightly more time before the end. That's what the long night does. It takes love and turns it into arithmetic. It makes you grateful for death because it means one less mouth to feed. It teaches you to see people not as people, but as numbers, as calculations, as resources to be managed. You hated yourself for thinking it, still hate yourself for it. But you thought it anyway because survival instinct doesn't care about morality, doesn't care about love, doesn't care about anything except staying alive one more day. And that relief, that terrible, shameful relief, is maybe the worst thing the long night has done to you. Not the physical suffering, not the hunger or the cold or the fear, but the way it's changed how you think, how you feel, how you value human life, including the lives of people you love. Your mother never recovered from losing him. She kept waiting for him to come home, kept looking at the door every time the wind blew, kept thinking every sound was his footsteps returning. She kept setting out a portion of food for him, putting it by his place at the table, saving it like he might walk in any moment and be hungry. She wasted food you desperately needed on a ghost, on a memory, on a man who was dead and wasn't coming back. You tried to tell her, tried to make her understand, but she wouldn't listen, couldn't listen, had retreated to some place inside herself where reality couldn't reach. She kept talking to him like he was sitting right there at the table, carrying on conversations with empty air, asking him about his day, about what he'd seen in the woods, about whether he thought spring would come early this year. One-sided conversations that became more elaborate, more detailed, more divorced from reality as time went on. She told him stories, made plans with him, discussed the future like there was a future, like anything mattered anymore. And eventually she just stopped talking to the living at all. Stopped responding when you spoke to her, stopped acknowledging that anyone else existed, just retreated entirely into the world she'd built with her dead husband, leaving her body behind to slowly freeze. The cold didn't kill her body, it killed everything else. It killed her spirit, her hope, her will, everything that made her your mother instead of just a breathing corpse. And now she's just waiting for her body to catch up with her mind, waiting for the cold to finally finish what it started, waiting to join your father in whatever comes after, if anything comes after, if death is anything more than just endless frozen darkness. Torin speaks suddenly, breaking the silence and pulling you out of your spiral of dark thoughts. Do you think the gods did this? You open your eyes. What? The long night. Do you think the gods are punishing us? The old gods? The new? Maybe we did something wrong, broke some law, forgot some ritual. Maybe if we could remember what we did, we could fix it. We could make offerings, say prayers, do whatever they want. And maybe they'd bring back the sun. Maybe they'd make it stop. You're quiet for a long moment, thinking about gods and prayers, and the ways people cling to meaning when the world stops making sense, when randomness and chaos become too terrifying to accept. Then you say, I don't think the gods care enough to punish us. Your voice is flat, dead, stating a fact, not offering an opinion. Then why is this happening? There has to be a reason. There has to be meaning. It can't just be random. It can't just be chaos. I don't know, you admit. Maybe there's no reason. Maybe it just is. Maybe the world is cruel and random and uncaring, and looking for meaning in suffering is just a way to make ourselves feel better about the fact that we're completely powerless. Someone has to know, Torin insists. There's desperation in his voice now. The old stories are lies, you say, and there's more bitterness in your voice than you meant, more anger, more despair. Heroes and swords and magic. None of it's real. It's just stories people tell so they can pretend the world makes sense. So they can believe in justice and destiny and happy endings. But the world doesn't make sense. Bad things happen to good people. Children die. The innocent suffer. And there are no heroes coming to save us. But the whites are real, Torin argues. The White Walkers are real. If the monsters are real, maybe the heroes are too. Maybe somewhere out there, someone is fighting for us. Someone is carrying a sword of fire. Someone is bringing the dawn. If the darkness is real, maybe the light is too. Maybe the prophecies are true. Maybe Azor Ahai is out there right now, forging Lightbringer, preparing to end this nightmare. You look at your brother, at his thin face and hollow eyes and desperate hope, his features sharp with starvation, his eyes too large in his skull. He still believes, despite everything. Despite the cold and the hunger and the death and watching the world end in slow motion, he still thinks someone's going to save them, still thinks the story has a hero, still thinks this ends any way except badly. Maybe, you whisper, because you can't take that from him, because hope is all he has left and taking it would be murder, would be killing him as surely as a knife to the heart. Maybe the heroes are real, but you don't believe it. Heroes are for songs and stories and warm nights by the fire when children ask for tales of adventure. When the world is safe enough that people can afford to tell lies about how good triumphs over evil. This is real life, and in real life, people just die cold and afraid and alone. In real life, there are no heroes. There are only survivors and corpses. And eventually, inevitably, all the survivors become corpses too. The scratching outside finally stops. You don't know when exactly. The sound is so constant that you've almost stopped hearing it. The way you stop hearing a sound that goes on long enough. The way it becomes background noise that you tune out. You just realize at some point that it's been quiet for a while. Minutes, Ours? Is it gone? Mara whispers from the corner. Her voice is tiny, fragile, like speaking too loudly might summon it back. Maybe, you say, carefully, not willing to believe, not willing to hope. Should we check? No, absolutely not, because checking means opening the door, and opening the door means risking everything, so you sit, and wait, and listen, straining your ears for any sound, any indication of what's happening outside, any clue about whether the white has left or is just standing there silently, waiting for you to make exactly this mistake. And slowly, the darkness deepens. Not that it makes much difference, it's always dark, but there are gradations of darkness, shades of black and gray, levels of shadow. The perpetual twilight of the long night has its own rhythms, its own cycles, even without a sun. It gets slightly lighter during what used to be day, not bright, never bright, but less dark. And it gets darker during what used to be night, the darkness deepening, becoming more absolute, more oppressive. And right now, it's getting darker, which means night is falling. Or what passes for night in the long night, the deepest dark, the coldest hours, the time when the whites are most active, when they move more freely, when they hunt more aggressively. And then you hear it, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Singing. Your head snaps up. Torrens does too. Did you... Yeah, it's coming from outside, from the east. A voice, thin and wavering, carrying across the frozen wasteland on the wind. A song, an old song. One your grandmother used to sing when you were small, when the world was still normal, when songs were for comfort and joy instead of desperate beacons in the dark. The winter rose, grows only where the cold wind blows. The words are faint but clear, carried on the wind, a human voice in the wilderness. Proof that you're not alone, that someone else is still alive, still singing, still fighting. Someone's alive out there, Mara whispers, and there's something in her voice you haven't heard in weeks. Hope, actual real hope, the dangerous kind, the kind that makes you do foolish things. You move to the door, press your ear against the frozen wood. The singing continues, closer now, moving toward your shelter through the darkness and the snow and the wind. In fields of white, in endless night, the rose still blooms with petals bright. The voice is old, you can tell that much. Female, exhausted, but still singing, still moving, still refusing to give up. We have to let them in, Torrin says. His voice is firm, decided, like this isn't up for debate. No, what? You turn to look at him. We don't know who they are. What if it's a trap? People don't sing when they're setting traps, Torrin argues. People don't sing at all anymore. The fact that she's singing means she's still human, still has hope, still remembers beauty. We have to help her. What if it's someone who needs help, Mara says, and there's steel in her voice now. Strength you'd forgotten she had. The old Mara coming back for just a moment. What if it's someone like us? What if they're alone and scared and dying and we're their last chance? What if we're their last hope and we turn them away because we're too afraid? You hesitate because she's right and she's wrong and you don't know which is more important. The singing is right outside now. When dawn returns, as dawn it must, the winter rose will turn to dust. The voice is clearer now, close enough that you can hear it trembling, hear the exhaustion, hear the desperate hope that keeps someone singing even when singing wastes precious breath and energy. And then it stops, silence, heavy, expectant. You hold your breath, your heart hammers, and then, softly, barely audible over the wind, a voice says, "Is anyone in there? Please. I know you're there. I saw smoke yesterday. I know that means people. Living people. Just please. I'm not one of them. I'm alive. I'm so cold. Please." It's a woman's voice. Old, exhausted, desperate. The voice of someone who has lost everything except the will to keep breathing. You look at Torrin, at Mara, at your mother, who's still staring at nothing, and you realize this is the choice. The real choice. Not about food or fire or survival. This is the choice about what kind of person you are. What kind of person you're going to be. Open the door and risk everything. Risk a trap. Risk betrayal. Risk letting in something dangerous. Something that will steal your food or hurt your family or bring the whites down on you. Or leave her out there. Let her freeze. Let her die alone in the snow. Save your family by abandoning your humanity. Your hand is on the door. You take a breath, cold air filling your lungs, and you make your choice, the only choice you can make and still be human. You open the door, just a crack, just enough to see. An old woman stands in the snow, barely visible against the white, small, bent, wrapped in rags that might have been a cloak once, layers of torn fabric and frozen hides that hang off her like grave clothes. She looks like she's wearing her own funeral shroud. Her face is skeletal, hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, lips blue with cold, skin stretched tight over bones. She looks like a corpse that forgot to die, like death walked up to her and she refused to go, and death just shrugged and walked away, leaving her caught between. But her eyes are brown, not blue, brown, warm brown, like earth, like life. She's alive. She looks at you, and something in her expression breaks. Thank the gods, she whispers. The words come out as a sob. Thank the old gods and the new. I thought I was the last one. I thought everyone was gone. I thought I was alone. You stare at her for a long moment, weighing the risk, calculating the odds, trying to decide if this is mercy or suicide, if you're saving someone or dooming yourselves. Then you step aside. Come in, quickly, before they hear us, before they come. She stumbles through the door, and you slam it shut behind her, throwing your weight against it. She collapses immediately, legs giving out like someone cut the strings holding her up, like a puppet that suddenly lost its puppeteer. Torin catches her before she hits the ground. Easy, he says. We've got you. She's sobbing now. Not loud, just quiet, broken sounds. Sounds like she hasn't cried in so long she forgot how. Like she's been holding it in for weeks, or months, or years, and finally, she's safe enough to let it out. Safe enough to be vulnerable, safe enough to break. Mara brings her a fur, wraps it around her shoulders with gentle hands, surprisingly tender, like she remembers how to care for people, like humanity isn't completely dead inside her. And you stand there, watching, and you realize something. You made the right choice. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it'll get you killed. Maybe she'll eat your food and take your furs and leave you with nothing. Or maybe she'll bring sickness or danger or death. But you made the right choice. Because humanity is all you have left. It's the only thing that separates you from the whites outside. Their corpse is animated by winter magic. But you're still human. You still care. You still choose mercy over survival. You still choose kindness over fear. And the moment you lose that, the long night has already won. Her name is Alice. She tells you this in a voice like wind, through dead leaves, rough and dry, and barely there. She's from a village 3 miles east, or what used to be a village. She waves a hand in a direction that might be east, but might be anywhere. Directions are hard when there's no sun, when there are no landmarks, when everything's just white. It's gone now. Everyone's gone. She's been wandering for weeks, she thinks, maybe months. She's not sure anymore, looking for other survivors. Looking for anything, anyone. Some sign that she's not the only person left alive in the world, that the whites didn't kill everyone, that humanity still exists somewhere. She hasn't found many, just a few, scattered, hiding, dying slowly, just like you. You give her a strip of meat. It's stupid. It's wasteful. It's 1/4 of your remaining food, handed to a stranger who might be dead by morning, who you owe nothing to, who gives you nothing in return except the knowledge that you're still capable of kindness. You can't afford to share. You can't afford kindness. Kindness is a luxury from the old world, from the world of plenty, from the world where giving didn't mean dying. But you do it anyway. Because if you stop being kind, if you stop caring about strangers, then what's the point? What are you surviving for? To become an animal? To become a thing that only thinks about its own survival? That's not living. That's just existing. And existing isn't enough. She eats slowly, carefully, like she's afraid the meat might disappear if she moves too quickly. Like this is a dream, and sudden movements might wake her and take away this precious gift. Like this single strip of dried, frozen, nearly inedible meat is the best meal she's had in weeks. It probably is. How long have you been out there? Torin asks. His voice is gentle. He's good at that. Always has been. Even in the long night, even with everything he's lost. He's kept that softness, that kindness. That ability to make people feel safe. I don't know anymore. She chews slowly. Time doesn't work right. Days, weeks, it all blurs together. There's no sunrise to mark the days, no seasons to mark the months. It's just an endless gray smear of cold and dark and suffering. Have you seen any others? Any survivors? She nods slowly, chewing carefully, making the meat last as long as possible. A few, not many. Most people are dead. The rest are hiding. Like you, scattered across the ruins, living in shelters and caves and anywhere they can find 4 walls and a roof. Afraid to move, afraid to leave, afraid to die, but also afraid to keep living because living hurts more than dying would. Have you seen them? The White Walkers? Her face goes pale. Paler than it already was, which shouldn't be possible. But somehow she manages it, all the blood draining from her face, her eyes widening in remembered terror. Once, she whispers, from a distance, just one, standing on a ridge, watching, waiting. I ran and didn't look back, and I don't know if it followed, or if it let me go, or if it even cared. I don't want to talk about it. No one pushes, because everyone understands. Some things are too terrible for words. Some memories are so awful that speaking them out loud would give them power, would make them real in a new way, would break something inside you that can't be fixed. The White Walkers are like that. Seeing them changes you. Everyone who's seen them and survived, they all have that same look in their eyes, that same 1,000-yard stare, that same trauma that can't be explained or shared or understood by anyone who hasn't seen them too. Alice looks around the shelter, at the walls, the frozen floor, the small pile of supplies that represents everything you have in the world. The 4 of you huddled in the dark, thin and scared and slowly dying. You've done well to survive this long, she says quietly. There's something like admiration in her voice, or maybe envy. We're not surviving, you say. Bitterness leaking into your voice. We're just dying slower. No. She looks at you, and there's something fierce in her eyes. Something that wasn't there before. Something that might be anger or determination or defiance or all 3. You're still alive. That means you're winning. Winning? You almost laugh. It's a bitter sound. Look around. We're starving in a frozen hole waiting for whites to break down the door, or for the cold to finally finish us, or for the hunger to get so bad we can't think anymore. That's not winning. That's just prolonged dying. It is, Alice says, and her voice is stronger now, more forceful, like she's arguing a point she believes deeply. It is winning. Because you're still here. You're still fighting. You haven't given up. You haven't walked out into the snow and let the cold take you. You haven't turned into animals tearing each other apart for scraps. You still care about each other. You still opened your door to a stranger. You still gave me food when you barely have any yourselves. You're still human. And as long as you're fighting, as long as you're choosing to keep breathing, keep moving, keep trying, there's hope. Hope for what? For the dawn. You laugh again. It's an ugly sound, harsh and bitter. The dawn isn't coming. The sun is gone. It's been gone for years. It's not coming back. This is permanent. This is forever. We're all gonna die here and nothing matters, and there's no hope. It always comes back, Alice says simply. How do you know? Because of the stories. And then she starts to talk. About legends older than memory. About heroes whose names have been worn smooth by time. About a man who walked into the darkness carrying nothing but faith and fire. About the last hero. About Azor Ahai. About a sword that burned like the sun itself, that brought light back to a world drowning in darkness. About the end of the first long night, 8,000 years ago, when the world was young and the darkness nearly won but didn't. And despite yourself, despite everything, despite the cold and the hunger and the certainty that you're all going to die here, you listen. Because stories are all humans have. Stories are how we make sense of the world, how we pass down wisdom, how we remember what matters. And right now, in this frozen shelter with death scratching at the door, maybe a story is exactly what you need. Maybe belief is more important than truth. Maybe hope, however irrational, is the only weapon you have left. Alice speaks for hours, or maybe minutes. Time still doesn't work right, still refuses to be measured in any meaningful way. But she tells the old stories with a voice like your grandmother's, like sitting by the fire on a winter night when winter was just a season instead of a death sentence. She tells the stories your grandmother used to tell, The ones you thought were lies, the ones you dismissed as fairy tales and children's nonsense meant to comfort the young and naive. Long before the wall stood, she says, there was a man who refused to run when everyone else did. There was a man who looked at the darkness and said, no, not today, not without a fight, not without making you earn it. He gathered 12 companions, she continues, the bravest souls he could find, warriors and rangers and hunters who knew the land, who knew how to survive in the wilderness when the wilderness had become hostile to life. He took his horse and his dog, he took his sword, and he rode north, not south toward safety, not into hiding, north, into the lands of always winter, into the realm of the White Walkers themselves, because he understood something. The darkness wouldn't end on its own. Someone had to make it end. Someone had to be willing to walk into death if it meant the possibility of saving everyone else. One by one his companions fell, she says, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality, the cadence of a story told many times before. The cold took them, the whites took them, the wind and the snow and the endless white took them. His horse died, his dog died, his sword shattered from cold so extreme it made metal brittle as glass. And still he walked, because he had to. Because if he stopped, the world ended. Not just his world, everyone's world. Every child who would never be born, every song that would never be sung, every story that would never be told. All of it ending in cold and darkness and silence unless he kept walking. So he did. And he found them, she says, the children of the forest, deep in a cave beneath a frozen river, in a place so old it had no name. They taught him. They told him what was needed, and he learned about sacrifice, about the terrible price that must be paid to forge a weapon that could end the long night. In the East, they tell it differently, she continues. They speak of Azor Ahai, a warrior of flame and light who forged a sword 3 times. The first time he tempered it in water. It shattered. The second time, he drove it through the heart of a lion. It broke. The third time, she pauses. The third time, he looked at his wife, Nissa, the woman he loved more than breath, and he drove the blade through her heart. Mara gasps. Torin looks horrified. Even you feel something stir, some echo of emotion you thought the long night had killed. And as she died, Alice continues softly, as her soul left her body, as her love and her life and her sacrifice poured into the metal, the sword ignited. It burned with the light of the sun itself. It became Lightbringer, the weapon that could end the long night, but at a cost so terrible that even the hero who wielded it was never the same. They say he never smiled again, never spoke of her, never looked at the sword without seeing her face. And he fought, Alice says. With Lightbringer burning in his hand, he went to war against the darkness, against the White Walkers, against death itself. The battle lasted years, or days, or maybe just one long, terrible moment. But when it was over, the darkness broke. The White Walkers were driven back. The whites fell silent. And after a generation of darkness, the sun rose. Dawn came. Slow at first, just a glow on the horizon, and then brighter and brighter, until the whole sky was on fire with light, and the world wept, for joy, for the lost, for the price that had been paid, because victory is never free, and the long night was defeated not with magic or prophecy or divine intervention, but with sacrifice, with love turned into a weapon, with hope forged in grief. The shelter is silent when she finishes. Just the wind outside, the occasional creak of stressed wood, your breathing, nothing else. You realize you've been holding your breath, caught up in the story, lost in the ancient tragedy of it. Torin is crying quietly. Mara is holding his hand. Even your mother seems to be listening, her eyes focused for the first time in days. Something like awareness, flickering in their depths. And you feel something you haven't felt in longer than you can remember. Not hope, exactly. You're not ready for hope. Hope is too dangerous, too fragile, too likely to break and cut you when it shatters. But something close to hope, something adjacent to it, something that might grow into hope, given time, given reason, given any evidence at all that the story is true. Somewhere out there, Alice says softly, someone is fighting. Someone is carrying fire into the dark. Someone is refusing to let the world end. How do you know? Mara asks. She's stopped crying. She's listening, rapt, hanging on every word. Because I choose to believe it, Alice says simply. And belief is all we have left. You asked if we're winning, and I say yes, we're winning. Because we're still here, still breathing, still human. The long night wants to take that from us, wants to turn us into frozen corpses or desperate animals fighting over scraps, wants to make us lose hope, lose faith, lose the things that make us people instead of just meat. But as long as we hold on to hope, as long as we choose to believe in dawn, as long as we remember that there's something worth surviving for, we're winning. That night, or what passes for night, you light the fire. You make the decision suddenly, without thinking it through, before you can change your mind. You take out the precious bundle of kindling, the last one, the one you were saving for some undefined moment of desperation. And you light it. You strike flint against steel, your hands shaking, coaxing sparks into the dried grass and twigs. The flames catch slowly, hesitantly, like they've forgotten how to burn, like fire itself has become uncertain in the long night. But then they grow, warm, golden, bright, real. The shelter fills with light. Not the gray half-light of the endless day, not the cold blue glow of white eyes. Fire, actual fire, living flame, dancing and crackling and warm. So warm. And for the first time in forever, in months or years, or however long it's been, you feel warm. Really warm. Not cold with furs warm, not huddled together sharing body heat warm. Actually, genuinely, beautifully warm. The fire radiates heat like the sun you can barely remember, and you hold your hands out to it like you're praying, like you're worshipping at the altar of warmth itself, like this small flame is a god worthy of devotion. Alice smiles, actually smiles. Her lips crack from the movement, bleeding slightly, but she doesn't care. Torin laughs, actually laughs. A sound you haven't heard in so long you'd forgotten what his laugh sounded like. Mara holds her hands out to the flames like she's greeting an old friend, like she's welcoming something precious that's been gone too long. Even your mother looks at the fire, and for just a moment you see something in her eyes. Recognition, memory, maybe even peace. Like the fire has reminded her of who she used to be, of a time before the cold, of a world where fire was common and warmth was assumed and life was beautiful. You cook the last of the meat, actually cook it, holding it over the flames until it sizzles and browns and smells like food instead of frozen leather. The smell is intoxicating, overwhelming, making your mouth water and your stomach cramp with hunger so intense it's painful. You melt snow for water, letting it simmer until it's actually warm, until drinking it doesn't feel like swallowing ice. You share a real meal, hot, filling, almost normal. And for an hour, maybe two, you pretend. You pretend the world isn't ending. You pretend you have a future. You pretend this warmth will last forever. And you tell stories, not the old legends, not tales of heroes and swords and prophecy. Just memories. Simple memories of the world before, of the sun and what it looked like at noon, blazing white gold in a blue sky so bright it hurt to look at. Of summer and the way the wheat fields looked when the wind blew through them, golden waves rippling like water, beautiful and abundant and proof that the world could be good. Of harvest festivals and market days and weddings and name days, and all the small celebrations that made life worth living. Of days when food was abundant and the cold was just something that happened in winter and went away in spring. Of a time when people laughed without fear, when children played without watching the tree line, when the dead stayed dead and the world made sense. It feels like a dream now, like something you invented, like those memories belong to someone else, some other person who lived in some other world. But it was real once. It was real, and you were there, and you remember. And maybe, it can be real again. Maybe the sun will come back. Maybe the cold will break. Maybe the long night will end just like the stories say, just like Alice believes, just like the legends promise. Maybe there are heroes out there right now, fighting for you, dying for you, carrying fire into the darkest places. Maybe dawn is coming. Maybe winter won't last forever. Maybe. That beautiful, dangerous, impossible word. Maybe. But while you sit in that small shelter, warmed by dying flames, surviving one more day in the ruins of the world, while you cling to hope like a drowning man clings to driftwood, like it's the only thing keeping you afloat in an ocean of despair, while you tell stories and share food and pretend that warmth and humanity are enough to hold back the darkness, there are others out there. Others who are doing more than surviving. Others who have walked into the heart of the storm carrying nothing but a blade and a promise and a determination that borders on insanity. Others who refuse to let the darkness win, refuse to accept that this is how the world ends, refuse to bow or break or give up no matter how impossible the fight becomes. And one of them became a legend, because even in the longest night, some lights burn so bright that history itself cannot forget them. Some people refuse to die quietly. Some heroes are born not from prophecy or destiny or divine will, but from simple, stubborn, human refusal to let evil win. The fire fades to embers, then to ash. The warmth leaches away. The cold creeps back in through the cracks and gaps and broken places. But something has changed. You've been reminded that fire exists. That warmth is possible. That hope, however fragile, however dangerous, however unlikely to survive the dawn that never comes, is still worth holding on to. Long before the wall stood tall against the northern sky, long before the Night's Watch swore their vows in darkness and cold, long before the 7 kingdoms were 7, or the first men carved their names into weirwood trees, there was a man. Or maybe he was many men, woven together in memory until one figure emerged from the tapestry of legend like a thread of gold and gray wool. Maybe he was a king crowned in starlight. Maybe he was a common soldier who simply refused to run when everyone else did. Maybe he was a priest or a blacksmith or a hunter. History doesn't remember his true name. The details have been worn smooth by 8,000 years of retellings, polished by generations of storytellers until only the essential shape remains. But it remembers what he did. In the east, beyond the Bone Mountains, in the land of red priests and shadow magic and cities older than memory, they call him Azor Ahai. In the north, among the first men and the children of the forest and the people who still pray to nameless gods in nameless groves, they remember him as the last hero. Different names, different stories, different details that contradict and overlap and merge, until the truth becomes impossible to separate from the myth. But the same truth at the heart of both legends, the same essential core. He was the one who walked into the darkness when everyone else ran from it. And he was the one who brought back the dawn. The battle lasted years, or days, or maybe just one long, terrible moment stretched across eternity. Time becoming meaningless in the clash of fire and ice, life and death, hope and despair. But when it was over, when the last blow had been struck and the final white had fallen and the White Walkers fled north into their frozen halls to wait and dream and plan their return, the darkness broke. The White Walkers were driven back beyond the edges of the world, back to the lands of always winter where nothing lives and nothing grows, where the ice is older than mountains and the cold is absolute. The whites fell silent, collapsing back into the death they should have never left, finally at rest. The cold began to recede, slowly at first, then faster, winter retreating like a tide going out. And after a generation of darkness, after a lifetime of gray and cold and fear, after children had been born and died without ever seeing light, the sun rose. Dawn came, slow at first, just a hint of light on the eastern horizon, a sea-ul glow that people thought they were imagining at first because they'd forgotten what light looked like. And then brighter, a line of gold appearing at the edge of the world, and then the sun itself, cresting the horizon, rising into the sky like a king reclaiming his throne, like a god returning from exile, like hope made manifest in fire and light. And the world wept, wept for joy, wept for relief, wept for the lost, wept for the price that had been paid. People emerged from caves and cellars and ruins, blinking in the light like newborns, covering their eyes because the brightness hurt after so long in darkness. They stood in the light and felt warmth on their faces and couldn't believe it was real. Children saw the sun for the first time and didn't understand what they were looking at, pointing and crying and asking what that bright thing was. Old people saw it for the last time and died happy, finally at peace, having lived to see the promise fulfilled. The snow began to melt, slowly at first, then in rushing torrents, rivers of snowmelt flooding valleys, washing away the corpses and the ruins and the evidence of how close they'd come to the end. In the north, they built the wall, a barrier of ice and magic 700 feet tall, stretching from the Bay of Seals to the gorge, 300 miles of frozen fortress standing between the world and the darkness. It's not just ice. The wall is woven with spells older than the Seven Kingdoms, magic worked into its very foundations by the children of the forest and the first men working together in an alliance forged in shared terror. Spells that prevent the White Walkers from passing, wards that keep the dead from crossing, protections that have held for 8,000 years, weakening slowly but still strong enough to do their job. And they founded the Night's Watch, an order of warriors sworn to stand guard for all eternity, to watch for the darkness, to remember the lesson that everyone else would eventually forget. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield that guards the realms of men. I pledge my life and honor to the Night's Watch, for this night and all the nights to come. Noble words, sacred vows, a promise that has lasted 8,000 years, passed down from generation to generation, from ranger to recruit, a chain of duty stretching back to the long night itself. But if you dig deeper into the histories of Westeros, if you go back further, into the time before the long night, before men, before the world, you find something darker, something that explains why the White Walkers exist at all, something that reveals the terrible truth. The darkness wasn't sent by gods or fate. It was created by mistake, created by desperation, created by magic that should never have been used and can never be taken back. Before there were 7 kingdoms, there was one land, unnamed and wild and beautiful beyond measure. Before there were kings and lords and castles, there were forests. Endless, ancient, untouched forests that stretched from the southern shores to the northern ice. Trees so old they remembered the world being born. Forests so deep that sunlight never touched the ground. Woods so sacred that walking through them felt like walking through a living temple. Before there were men, there were the children of the forest. Small, timeless, bound to the earth itself in ways humans could never understand. They carved faces into weirwood trees so the old gods could watch the world through bark and leaf. They sang to the rivers, and the rivers sang back. They spoke to the wind, and the wind carried their words to the edges of the world. They walked beneath the trees, and the trees remembered their footsteps, held their memories in rings of wood and patterns of root. They lived for thousands of years in peace, in harmony, in a world that was balanced and whole and good. And then the peace ended, not because of anything they did. The peace ended because men came. They came from the east, across the land bridge that once connected Westeros to Essos. The first men, taller than the children, stronger, more numerous, carrying bronze weapons and fire and horses. They saw the forest and thought, timber, resources, raw materials. They saw the clearings and thought, farmland, places to plant crops, to raise animals, to build. They saw the sacred groves where the weirwoods grew and thought, this is in the way, cut them down. So they cut, they burned, they took. The children watched in horror as their world was destroyed, tree by tree, grove by grove, mile by mile. The faces carved into the weirwoods stared sightlessly as the trees fell, and the old gods screamed in silence because gods without worshippers, without trees to see through, are powerless. The children tried to fight back. They called on the magic of the earth. They shattered the land bridge with earthquakes. They flooded valleys. They sent storms that could tear mountains apart. But the first men kept coming, more and more of them, endless waves. The children were losing. Their forests were shrinking, their numbers dwindling. And so they made a choice, a terrible choice, a choice born of desperation and the certainty that they were watching their entire world die. They decided to create a weapon. Deep in the haunted forest, in a place so old it didn't have a name, the Greenseers gathered, 13 of them, the most powerful. They brought a prisoner, a first man, a warrior captured in battle. They bound him to a weirwood tree, and then they performed the ritual. They spoke words in a language older than sound. They drew symbols in the earth with ash and blood. They called on magic that should never have been called. And then one of the children stepped forward. In her hand she held a shard of dragon glass, black, sharp, older than the world. She raised it above the first man's chest. He screamed, and she drove the shard into his heart. His eyes turned blue, glowing, empty, cold. His skin went pale. His breath became frost. His heartbeat stopped, but he didn't die. He changed. The first man was gone, and in his place stood something new, something wrong. The first White Walker. The children thought they had created a guardian, and at first it worked. The White Walker turned on the first men with cold fury. He raised the dead to fight for him. He brought winter wherever he walked. But they had made a mistake. A terrible, irreversible mistake. Because the White Walker didn't just hate the first men, he hated life itself. Warmth, growth, everything that lived and breathed. He wanted it all to end. And he wasn't alone. The children made more, 12 more, 13 in total. 13 walking curses. And the White Walkers could create more themselves. They touched the dead, and the dead rose. An army that grew with every battle. The children realized too late what they had done. They tried to stop it. But you can't uncreate a curse. The White Walkers turned on everyone. They marched south, killing indiscriminately. Every village became a graveyard, and behind them, winter came. The sun began to fail. The world froze. The long night began, not as punishment from the gods, but because the children, desperate and dying, tried to create a weapon and created a curse instead. Eventually, the children and the first men realized they had to stop fighting each other. Together they fought back. And eventually, they drove the White Walkers north, not destroyed, just pushed back, into the lands of always winter. The children helped build the wall, wove magic into its foundations, and they made a pact, never forget, never stop watching, because they're not gone, they're only sleeping. 8,000 years. That's how long it's been since the long night ended. And in that time, the world changed. The first men spread. The Andals came. The Targaryens arrived on dragons. The world moved on, and slowly people forgot. The long night became a legend. The White Walkers became stories. Winter is coming became a motto rather than a warning. The wall still stands. But most people don't remember why. The wall. 700 feet tall, 300 miles long. The Night's Watch mans it still. Black-cloaked brothers sworn to guard the realms of men, but the Watch has fallen on hard times. Once they numbered in the tens of thousands, now barely a few thousand. Most are criminals. The rest are bastards and unwanted sons. They stand on the wall, and most don't believe in White Walkers. But some remember. The old rangers, they know. The darkness is still out there. And it's waking up. In the far east, in Ashai, the Red Priests still remember. They worship R'hllor, the Lord of Light, and they know his enemy, the Great Other, the god of ice and death. They know the long night wasn't unique. It was a cycle, and they speak of a prophecy. There will come a day when the stars bleed and the cold falls heavy. Derin, this hour a warrior shall draw from fire a burning sword, Lightbringer, and he shall be Azor Ahai come again. The prince that was promised, and in Westeros the signs are appearing. The winters are getting longer, colder. Beyond the wall, wildlings are fleeing south, rangers disappear, the weirwoods are bleeding, and in the far north, something is stirring. The White Walkers are waking, winter is coming, and this time, the world has forgotten how to fight it. But maybe there's hope. In the ruins of Valyria, dragons died out centuries ago, but legends speak of dragon eggs, 3 of them, turned to stone, unless the right person, at the right time, could wake them, could bring dragons back. And if dragons could return, then maybe there's a chance. Because the long night was ended once before with fire. On the wall, the Night's Watch still stands. Undermanned, under-equipped, disbelieved, but standing. They light fires every night. They sharpen their weapons. They keep the watch. Most don't believe in White Walkers, but they believe in each other. In the oaths they swore. And maybe that's enough. Maybe belief in heroes is less important than simply refusing to give up. 8,000 years ago, humanity survived by standing together. First men and children, enemies who became allies. They built the wall, founded the watch, made a promise. We will remember. We will stand guard. For 8,000 years that promise has held. And when the long night returns, they'll stand again. Maybe they'll have a hero. Maybe they'll have dragons. Or maybe they'll just have courage. The human refusal to go quietly into the dark. Because winter is coming. It's always coming. But dawn is coming too. Always. The cycle never ends. Darkness and light. Winter and summer. Death and life. And humanity must choose which side to stand on. The people in that frozen shelter made their choice. They chose to keep breathing, to keep fighting, to open their door to a stranger, to share their last food, to light their last fire, to believe that dawn was possible. They chose to be human. And maybe that's the real magic, not dragons or prophecy, just ordinary people doing extraordinary things, choosing hope over despair, light over darkness, life over death. The long night is coming again. The White Walkers are waking. Winter is marching south. The world has forgotten. But some remember. Some are preparing. Some are lighting fires and sharpening swords. Some are reading prophecies and waking dragons. Some are simply surviving, choosing to keep breathing because breathing is defiance. The fire burns low. The embers fade. The cold creeps back. But for a few hours, there was warmth. There was light. There was hope. And maybe that's enough. The stories say that when dawn came after the first long night, the world wept. For joy, for the lost, for the price paid. And maybe that's true. Or maybe it's just a story. But it teaches something, that some prices must be paid. That love can be a weapon. That dawn always comes. So tonight, as you drift off, remember. The long night happened. 8,000 years ago, the sun disappeared. The dead rose. And humanity survived. Not because of magic or prophecy, because people chose to keep fighting, chose hope. And that choice was enough. The lesson is simple. Even in the darkest times, when all hope seems lost, some people refuse to give up. Some lights refuse to die. And that's what makes us human. The stubborn refusal to let the darkness win. Rest now. Let the fire keep you warm, at least in memory. Let the stories fill your dreams. And if you dream of winter, of cold and darkness, remember this. Even the longest night ends. Even the deepest cold breaks. Even the most terrible darkness must yield to light. Because winter is coming. It's always coming. But dawn comes too. Always. And dawn always wins. Not easily, not without cost. But it wins. Because people make it win. Winter is coming. It's marching south right now. The White Walkers are waking. The dead are rising. And the world is unprepared. But not completely. Because some remember. Some are watching. Some are standing guard, lighting fires, preparing. And when the darkness arrives, they'll stand. They'll fight. They'll hold the line. And maybe they'll have help. Maybe Azor Ahai will be reborn. Maybe dragons will wake. Maybe magic will return. Or maybe there will just be people. Ordinary people with ordinary weapons. And maybe that will be enough. Because it was enough before. Thank you for walking through the long night with me. Thank you for listening, for imagining, for feeling. Thank you for remembering. These stories matter. They've mattered for 8,000 years. Because they teach us something essential about who we are and what we're capable of. I hope these stories bring you comfort, help you sleep, remind you that even in dark times, there's always a reason to keep going. There's always someone standing guard. There's always hope. Leave a light before you go. A candle, a lamp. Something to remind you that fire still burns, that warmth exists, that light pushes back the dark. And return soon for more tales from Westeros. Until then, stay warm, stay safe, stay human. And remember, the night is dark and full of terrors, but the fire burns them all. Winter is coming, but so is spring. Death comes, but so does life. And dawn, after the longest night, after the deepest winter, after the most terrible darkness, dawn comes. And it's worth it. Because dawn means we won. Dawn means we survived. Dawn means we get to keep living for another day. And that's everything. That's why we fight. For dawn. For light. For life. For each other. That's the promise. That's the hope. That's the magic. Our refusal to give up on the world, on each other, on hope itself. The scratching at the door has long since stopped. The white either wandered away or stands frozen in place outside, patient as the winter that created it. Inside the shelter, 5 people sit in the fading warmth. The fire is dying now, reduced to glowing embers that cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. Alice has fallen asleep, wrapped in the furs Mara gave her breathing steady and deep. The sleep of someone who hasn't felt safe in months. Torrin sits by the door, spear across his knees, keeping watch as he always does. Mara has curled up next to your mother, and your mother, for the first time in days, has put her arm around her daughter, holding her close. A small gesture, but it means something. And you sit with your back against the wall, watching the fire die, thinking about stories and heroes and hope, thinking about the last hero walking north into certain death, thinking about Azor Ahai driving a sword through his wife's heart, thinking about ordinary people making impossible choices because someone had to. You think about Alice singing in the snow, that old song about winter roses blooming in endless night. Just a song, just words. But words matter, stories matter, because stories are how humans remember, how we teach ourselves to be brave when bravery seems foolish, to be kind when kindness seems wasteful, to hope when hope seems delusional. Maybe somewhere out there, someone is forging Lightbringer right now. Maybe someone is preparing to pay the terrible price. Maybe someone is walking into the darkness carrying nothing but faith and fire. Or maybe there is no chosen one. Maybe there never was. Maybe we're all Azor Ahai. Every person who lights a fire in the darkness, every person who shares their food with a stranger, every person who chooses hope over despair. The last ember dies, the darkness returns, the cold presses in, but 5 people breathe in the dark. 5 hearts beat, 5 souls endure. Tomorrow you'll wake to darkness again. Tomorrow you'll go out into the cold searching for food. Tomorrow the struggle continues, but tonight you had warmth, you shared a meal, you welcomed a stranger. You remembered what it means to be human. And somewhere, perhaps, in the vast, frozen wasteland of Westeros, other lights flicker in other shelters. Other people make the same choice you made. Other fires burn, other stories are told, other hopes are kindled. And maybe, when you add them all up, all those small lights and small choices, maybe they're enough. Maybe the sum of human stubbornness is greater than the weight of winter. The long night is coming. It's already here. But so are you. So are we. And that has to count for something. So rest now. Let the stories comfort you. Let the warmth of memory sustain you. And when you wake, remember, you are not alone. Across the frozen wasteland, other people are making the same choice. Other lights are burning. Other voices are singing in the dark. The night is dark and full of terrors. But the fire burns them all. Winter is coming. But so is dawn. Always, leave a light before you go. And return soon, for more tales from Westeros, from the long night, and beyond. Until then, stay warm, stay safe, stay human. Good night.